I'm not going to let the story of Lieutenant Michael Behenna be covered up by the mainstream media. A great injustice was done to this outstanding soldier who is being punished for doing his job and saving lives. He's rotting in a cell in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Joining us now is Vicki Behenna, his mother, to give us a new update on what's going on. Mrs. Behenna, welcome back to the Savage Nation.
Dr. Savage, thank you for having me on again.
For the listeners who may have missed this important story, please give us a reminder of what's going on with your son.
My son, Michael, was a first lieutenant in the United States Army serving a tour in a combat zone in Iraq. His platoon was hit by an IED in April of 2008. After that attack, and the attack killed two of his soldiers, two Iraqis that were traveling with him, and seriously injured the platoon sergeant and company medic. After that attack, Michael read a military intelligence report that Ali Mansour was a member of an al-Qaeda cell, and that the al-Qaeda cell was responsible for the attack. After Michael read Mansour's name, the platoon did exactly what they were supposed to do, and they went out and detained Mansour to bring him in for questioning about the attack and the al-Qaeda cell. Mansour stayed in custody for about 10 days, and after that time, Michael was told that Mansour was being released, and Michael was ordered to take him home. Michael asked his commanders, please, do another interrogation and find out more about this al-Qaeda cell. And they said it didn't really matter what Mansour said, that he had been ordered release and that Michael was to take him home. So Michael took it upon himself to do an interrogation. When he did that, Mansour, who was seated on a rock during the interrogation, stood at one point in time and tried to reach for Michael's gun. Michael shot him in self-defense. He was brought up on charges for premeditated murder. During Michael's trial, we didn't know it at the time until after Michael was convicted of unpremeditated murder, but what we learned subsequent to that is that the government prosecutors, the military prosecutors, had an expert forensic scientist who explained to them that their theory was wrong and that Michael, more likely than not, did act in self-defense. That evidence was withheld. It wasn't turned over to the defense lawyers. Michael was convicted of, as I said, of unpremeditated murder and sentenced originally to 25 years. The General Townsend at the 101st Airborne Division reduced Michael's sentence to 20 years. And then the Army Clemency and Parole Board just recently reduced Michael's sentence from 20 years to 15.
Well, what's happening now?
Michael's defense lawyer, Mr. Jack Zimmerman, has filed an appeal on Michael's behalf. The appeal addresses the Brady violation, and that is where the prosecutors did not turn over evidence that was favorable to the defense. And so that issue is on appeal. There are some other issues that are raised in that brief as well. We're hoping that the government will respond to the brief fairly quickly. It's my understanding that the Army Court of Appeals is very liberal in its extensions, but because Michael's sitting in prison, I'm hoping that they'll respond more quickly than they normally would. But after it's briefed up, that's what we call it when all the briefs are filed, it'll be set for oral argument in Washington, D.C., and then a decision will be reached by the appellate court. We're, of course, hoping and praying that the appellate court will realize that a grave injustice occurred during Michael's trial, and they will remand the case or send it back, reverse the conviction and send it back for a new trial.
How is Michael holding up?
Michael does extremely well under the circumstances. When he first made it to Fort Leavenworth in the prison, I was, as you can imagine, very concerned about his mental health and how he would deal with such limited restrictions on his freedom and being with people. I mean, these are all nice people that are in this facility, and I was curious about and concerned about how he would deal with that. But Michael told me initially that he was an Army Ranger, and Rangers adapt and overcome, and so that's what he's been doing.
I know many of my listeners have been sending letters. Is Michael receiving these?
Yes, Michael has been receiving a tremendous amount of letters from your supporters, and it is inspiring him and encouraging in him and helping him feel that there is hope at the end of this very dark tunnel. He can receive letters by snail mail. He doesn't have access to a computer, so there are no emails, nothing like that, text messages or anything like that. He can just receive letters from people, and it is most grateful for the response from your listeners.
Has Michael's story received any other coverage from the mainstream media?
One of the things that's been very disappointing to me is the fact that the national media has not picked up Michael's story. I don't have contacts in the national press, and so the only way that we could contact people, at Fox News or Good Morning America or the Today Show was to send emails to people and let them know about Michael's story. They have not picked up the story as of yet, although I'm still hopeful at some point in time people will pick up Michael's story. I think it's important for the public to understand the dangers our soldiers face in a combat zone, and then how they're second-guessed, and how when a miscarriage of justice occurs, what happens and how that affects an individual and the family. And so I think it's an important story, but so far the national media has not picked it up. So I appreciate everything that you're doing, keeping Michael's story alive.
Well, where does it go from here?
What has been, what we're hoping for right now, and I pray for it every night, is that the appellate court will realize that a grave injustice occurred and that they will reverse this conviction. The law is on Michael's side. And when I say the law, I'm talking about Supreme Court precedent. So the law is on his side, and the facts are on his side. This evidence that the prosecutors had in their hand and in their possession, that their forensic evidence disagreed with their theory of how the shooting occurred, should have been turned over. Michael's testimony was supported by the forensic evidence. That should have been turned over. And it wasn't. So we're very hopeful, and as I said, pray every night that the appellate court sees it the way we do. The only thing that we have ever asked the Army to do, even early on while this was still pending in the trial court, was to grant Michael a new trial where the jury could hear all the evidence. And if the jury still felt that Michael didn't act in self-defense, and they still believe that he executed him in the head like the prosecutors argue that he did, I will be brokenhearted again. But at least as a person who has practiced in the criminal law area my entire life, I'll feel like the jury had all the facts they needed to reach their decision. Right now, the jury was not given all the facts. And so you just can't help but believe, had the jury heard that not just the defense forensic experts agreed Michael was acting in self-defense, but also the government prosecutor's own expert believed Michael was acting in self-defense, that it would have exonerated him. So we're hopeful that the appellate court reaches that decision as well.
What else can my listeners do to help?
One of the things that we have asked individuals to do, of course, is to write the letter to Michael, because it helps him tremendously, but to also contact their senators and congressmen and the Secretary of Defense to let them know that the prosecutions of soldiers who are trying to defend themselves in a combat zone, we just, as an American public, won't allow to happen, particularly as it happened in Michael's case. So I would appreciate it if everybody could just write a letter saying that we are aware of what's happening to these soldiers, this soldier in particular, and we cannot abide by the way that he was prosecuted and evidence withheld in his case.
Vicki Behenna, thanks again for being on my show.
I appreciate everything that you're doing for Michael, and thank you for having me share Michael's story again.
Folks, please go to my website, michaelsavage.com, and contribute what you can for Lieutenant Behenna. I have sent a check of $10,000 from you to the fund, to his fund. If you can't send any money, write a letter to Lieutenant Behenna. Write a letter to Congress. As you saw by Massachusetts, each and every one of us can make a difference. Savage.